You're listening to the Our Erie podcast with Marty Nwachukwu,
Lydia, Laythe,
and Davona Pacley.
This series will bring citizens, entrepreneurs, activists, politicians, artists, and thought leaders to the table for a frank discussion around societal issues facing our post-industrial city and the United States at large. Take a seat.
As some of our listeners may be aware of, last week we were unpacking the incident that happened at Erie City Council in which a council member was insulted by another council member. Liz Allen was called a nut and was called a broad, was told to shut it and shut her mouth by a fellow council member, Ed Brzezinski. We kind of unpacked our initial reactions to that last week. And then this past week, shortly after the release of that reaction in our episode, we had another opportunity to observe an Erie City Council meeting in which we were hoping Councilmember Ed Brzezinski would potentially apologize for his comments, give some context maybe, or just apologize for something that was just so glaringly inappropriate. And I won't say that he did or he did not. We'll just let him speak for himself. We have some clips from the meeting of residents and other community members voicing their concerns, as well as Councilmember Brzezinski's reaction to that and his apology or non-apology.
Okay, Elspeth?
I would like to thank council members who do advocate for process and procedure, because I agree it does take away from disagreements that could be had and rude behavior that could come from those disagreements. I'd like to see some apologies be made, some denouncing of that sort of misogynist and sexist behavior and speech. And going forward, you guys all need to do a better job. I agree that some of the statements that were made at the beginning of this about, publicly chastising the behavior, if you're going to publicly display that kind of behavior, you need to, if you don't agree with it, you need to publicly say you don't agree with it. If it's happening and you're saying, hey, I'm sorry people are treating you like that behind closed doors, no one knows about it. So thank you for those of you. Thank you, Ruckus. Thank you for those of you who did say something to denounce that sort of behavior. Thank you. Got to deal with these people and cats and dogs.
Jim Wertz.
Good morning, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I echo some of the previous speakers here and would add that it seems odd that in 2020, anyone would have to remind City Council or any public body that the internet serves as a welcome mat to our community. For most outsiders, many of whom may never make their way to the city of Erie, this is their first, and depending on what they see and hear, sometimes their last impression of Erie. In the wake of the 2020 elections, when most of the world was watching Erie as the ultimate swing county in the United States, the actions of some members of City Council changed the tone of that conversation from one of intrigue and awe to one of ridicule and shame. It's because the media outlets in Washington, D.C. Picked up that Zoom confrontation that's been mentioned so many times when one councilman referred to a councilwoman as, quote, a nut and a broad. Not only is such talk unbecoming of a member of council, the chuckling and reactions of other members of council adds to the poor representation of the city, and it gives us all a bad name. Those of us that travel outside of Erie also spend a lot of time selling the community to people who don't know about its potential and the future that many of us work for throughout the region. all of that goodwill is squandered when those same people see in their local news that Erie is governed by folks with misogynistic attitudes toward their colleagues. And people can only assume that such views extend to the community at large. In the course of any day, I spend a good deal of time trying to answer people who ask why they should still vote for Democrats in a city governed by Democrats that's struggling with population loss and decline. The words and actions of members of this council often make those conversations more difficult. And ultimately, the focus of those conversations becomes the future, because it's clear that sometimes when our public officials speak, they speak only for the past. So the next time that the Chamber of Commerce fails to land a new business in Erie or the opportunity zones remain underinvested, you can be sure that the faith of those investors is challenged by old words, old attitudes, and the old ideas they represent. Next year, Erie gets another shot at electing officials of substance who know better than to degrade their colleagues and members of the community in public or in private. The Democratic Party, I assure you, will support candidates who believe in civility and the future that comes with elected officials who represent the cities of Erie in a mindful and respectful manner, because we all deserve better. Thank you.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Yeah, no committee reports or anything like that. I thank the citizens that called in and are concerned. I'd also like to tell Mr. Wertz to do his homework before he starts shooting his mouth off. Anyway, for my part in this whole craziness, my apology is sent out. But don't ever forget, you kick a sleeping dog, you could get bit. So both sides are wrong on this thing. The broad comment was a terrible comment. I thought my mic was off when I was letting out some exhaustion, so to speak, frustration. But hopefully we can bury that, move forward, share ideas, and be a better council next year. Thank you.
Again, long sigh. I think I did that last time. I need to take a deep breath, right? I think I was like, I need to take a deep breath because again, I need to take a deep breath. That was an apology. That was gaslighting again. But I'm gonna let y'all know. That's what I'm gonna let y'all know. It's gas. That was gaslighting at its finest. You don't say, I sorry for, if I did this. Like, I mean, it was just very
well, he didn't even I don't even know if he said sorry or apologize actually for the actual insult and the horribleness of what he said, but he said he thought his microphone was muted.
That, yes. No, you know what?
As if that justifies it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought my microphone was muted. Oh, I'm sorry you heard my insult. I thought you weren't going to hear my insult. That doesn't make it okay.
And then we both were in the wrong. You were in the wrong. What do you mean? You were the one that was in the wrong. And for me, it showed just a lack of responsibility again, and a lack of taking a lack of being aware that it was not about you. And again, it was made about you. And it to me, the whole point was about the man that was supposed to be honored, but it seems like now it's about him. And that it was, and to me, that was really, it was that was just shameful. I just can't, shameful.
It was really an embarrassing sight because beyond us, reacting on here with this platform we have and on our own social media, and the community reacted on social media. People wrote letters. People reached out to these individuals. There were emails sent. There were comments made. I know other organizations also, contacted council and the mayor's office. And for this to be their public response was the most embarrassing and disappointing. They had more than a week to pull themselves together, to write statements. You didn't even think to prepare anything.
Right.
And It just shows you if you can't even perform or successfully do an apology for something that was so very public, then of course they don't get anything done on council or step up for like the issues that really matter. They can't. It was a ridiculous sight to see, and even in Ed Brzezinski's response, I think if not the first thing he said or one of the first things he said was calling out one of the citizens who spoke out and calling him out specific. I'll just say who it was. It was Jim Wertz, who's the chair of the Democratic Party. Instead of getting straight to his apology, he had to call out a specific member of the public and say, "You need to learn," or what
do your homework.
Your homework, which if you hear the response that Jim did, he did his homework. So my thing was like, what did you hear? Because I heard that he did his homework and he's telling you that what you did is shameful. Like, I don't understand. Y'all help me make it sense. Make it make sense.
Right. No, well, and we were talking about this earlier, that like, in my experience, the saying like, you just don't know enough, or you need to do your homework, or you haven't learned as much as I have, is like the typical old white male cop out for dealing with a disagreement. Rather than dealing with people as equals, they will just say, well, you should have done your homework, or you should just learn better, or if you were older and knew more, you'd think differently. Like, nah, like we know more. Quite frankly, we probably know a lot more than you about a lot of different things. We've done our homework, we know what's going on, and we still disagree with you. So now deal with us as an equal, have to like shift your worldview and talk to us and engage with us. But like, you can't just shut down a conversation because you say, do your homework.
Yeah. And you're right, because this is, to me, I feel like it's just even more so about like common decency and just kind of like empathy. Like it just really lacked empathy. And I was looking at, I'm sorry, I was looking at poor councilperson Liz, and I felt bad. I really did. I mean, and maybe I'm just, I don't know. I felt bad because I'm just like, in all of this situation, there was nothing that was rectified. And, especially for her. And I was supposed to be sitting on there as a team, being a team player, I would feel like I could not trust anybody. And I know that's, and then when you see that, and as a citizen, personally, I feel like they can't trust that you have our city at it's in its best interest if you cannot make these decisions that are of sound mind, and making the decision to not really address a situation that was super, super, super detrimental, not only to that person, but detrimental to just how we see city council to be, is really sad. It's really sad because like I said, we're moving forward as a city trying to grow. But then you see our council having all these issues with just lack of concern for how you treat one another. That to me is interesting. I don't even understand why this is happening.
In my opinion, most of them lacked any kind of empathy, because even when they were addressing the situation and being kind of forced by the public to address the situation, very few of them actually addressed Liz Allen directly and their lack of any kind of action in the moment that it happened. In fact, one of the council members kind of chastised, I don't know if you want to call it chastised, the public for, making such a big deal about it.
Yeah.
Letting
letting it play out in the media.
Yeah.
Like, well,
play out.
Well, if it happens
public, how will we know that you were saying anything privately? Well, that doesn't matter to us as people viewing it from whether it was live or later on. We don't know where you stand because you did not speak publicly. And for that to be like your main point was kind of disappointing. I will give credit where credit is due. I think Councilman Brennan did an okay job.
Yeah. I don't know much about him, but I was super impressed by, and maybe it's just because I had such low expectations for anyone's response, but like when he was talking, I was like, okay, like that's an adult appropriate response to the bullshit that this all was.
And unfortunately, it's kind of bad. It's not bad. Unfortunately, it's sad that we can't see the beauty of some of the people that are sitting on that city council because of these things happening. You know what I'm saying? Because some people taking the light from other situations that need to be happening, like that situation with that Brzezinski, with him, making the remarks towards Miss Liz Allen was not, he did not have to do that. It took away from just the whole point of what they were talking about anyway. But there's so many people on there that we could be,
right. But I'm glad it happened, because when we, as people who pay attention to council, or even if we don't make it to every single meeting, are just kind of aware of the characters and things, when we talk about needing change for the city, sometimes it's hard to make it really tangible, because you might not agree with the way they vote on a certain thing or this, but to see their behavior made it very clear to people that these people do not stand for anyone, let alone their own colleagues.
Yeah. And I agree with that. The one thing that really stood out to me too in that whole city council meeting, and I really encourage, the community, I get it. I sometimes know that city council meetings are the last thing that we want to attend, but I'm just going to encourage people, please try to watch them on YouTube. It's super important to know what's going on. And, just with that being said, I look at a lot of the city council members that are sitting on there, and, they made a couple remarks saying, well, I'm not a politician, right? And I'm not one that, I'm not political. I'm not this, I'm not that. You're up there. You're a politician. You're sitting in that seat. You were voted, people voted for you. They put
people
you
trusted you.
You are a politician. I know that because even me, I used to think about, well, I'm not a politician. I'm not, I get it, because there's this word, that word has become very saturated with so many different narratives that people have painted for it. But when you are putting yourself in a public space, when you are putting yourself out there and saying, I want to be in these positions, you have to know that it's for the community. So you are a politician, whether you like it or not. And I think that you have to be in that role and be in that role fully. And if you don't want to be in that role, then you need to go ahead to the side and sit somewhere else and say, I can't do this. Have the humility to say that, and have the honesty with yourself to say that. But for you to sit up people, because I will say, I think it was one of the city council members, can't even remember his name. No, it was Councilperson Winarski. He said, well, I'm not a politician, because somebody else had said it. Y'all need to stop painting that narrative. Then you need to sit down, because that job is, I know that job is probably not easy. It's not easy to sit up there and be reprimanded probably by people and being, ridiculed like that. But at the end of the day, you put yourself in that space. And so at the end of the day, what are you going to do? How are you going to, justify some of the things that you're doing? How are you going to rectify some of the choices that you've made? I know it's hard, but don't be in leadership positions then.
I mean, at the core definition, and this is me going off of my poli-sci 101, but I believe the definition of politics is the decision making between the distribution of resources. So if you don't want to have that kind of responsibility, don't put yourself up there. That comes with the title being a politician. Yeah, we associate it with being swarmy and gross, but that's because we have individuals like yourselves that don't take things seriously and talk any way you want to people, as the examples of what people do in leadership. Politics does not have to be this way. Politics maybe has always been this way because of the people who have always run for office.
Yes.
But a lot, like Lydia said last time, a lot of the people that we're talking to on the show, a lot of the people who are listening, you are the kind of people who can run for office and make real change.
Yes.
Don't be afraid of the title of being a politician. If you really care about people and you believe you can make the right decisions about making sure certain resources go to the community in the way that they need to, then you belong up there. Not these people who are up there worried about, I don't know, naming streets after people or random.
Or just saving face. So much of this just feels like wanting to avoid conflict. Even in what Ed Brzezinski said, he said something like, well, I hope we can just bury this.
No.
He doesn't want to take accountability for it or unpack any of the systemic, sexist, misogynistic, and all then the issues are related to that, right? Racist, classist, ableist, homophobic, all these issues are interconnected. And if you just want to bury this one issue, then that probably means you want to bury all the issues and you don't want to talk about any of it. And to me, that is hugely concerning for a community that's trying to grow and try to frame themselves as a welcoming city, which quite frankly, the mayor said something that was pretty freaking similar to what Ed Brzezinski said about burying the issue. So in the mayor's response during a separate clip, he said something to the effect of, I appreciate what every like council person is doing. The only thing I'd like to say is I would like to thank Ed Betza, who apparently he didn't realize Ed Betza and Ed Brzezinski are two different people, that he'd like to thank Ed Betza for apologizing to Liz Allen, which, as we know, was not quite an apology. That I hope this gives us the opportunity to move forward with a much more mutual, respectful way of doing business in this city.
And was correct.
And we tried to reach out to the mayor to try to talk to him because he wasn't in this bigger meeting in the aftermath where Ed Brzezinski, quote unquote, apologized. We tried to reach out to the mayor to talk to him more. And we have not heard back from him. Like no response.
This is not.
I watched. I didn't watch it live when it was happening, but I watched the meeting to the entirety. And at the end, he was there. He did speak, but he did make that slip up about accepting the apology from Ed Betza. Betza is the solicitor for the city. So, as soon as I heard that, it was like, that's how seriously you're taking this issue, that you don't even know who the person you are addressing. You don't care. You're just kind of making some type of formal statement. And like, who are you to also accept the apology on behalf of Councilman Liz Allen? And you're not even, on top of the fact that you're not even a woman. Like, maybe we can be like, okay, if he had done a proper statement, but Brzezinski, we could be like, okay, as a woman, I feel like he actually addressed the situation, and you know, you can accept this apology. You were not, one, Liz Allen, to accept the apology. 2, you're not paying attention to who even gave the apology. And 3, he didn't make any kind of statement as to what Brzezinski was apologizing for. He didn't condemn the behavior that led to this whole fiasco.
Right.
Yeah.
Or take accountability for his silence in the initial incident either. Because I feel like that to me was just as concerning. All these people that stayed silent, and the only person that I heard become accountable for that was that Brennan guy. That like he was the only one that said, you know what, I should have said something.
Yeah. And I hate to put it kind of, I don't know why, I literally just thought about like kids. Like if you don't address an issue, it's going to become a bigger issue. So my thing is like, you're right. When it came to addressing the fact that you need to have apologized for these direct statements, that way, you know, I'm telling you, this is not right. Like, and you're right. Like, I don't know why I'm putting that with a little kid, because it's kind of like when your kid does wrong, right? And you're reprimanding them for something, you're not just going to ignore the behavior, right? If you ignore the behavior, that behavior is going to continue to happen. Not a therapist, but right?
A child would have made a better apology. Like if we had a class of kindergartners witness this, they could have told you all the ways that this was not any kind of proper apology by any individual there or by the body itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's, oh, wow. There's just so much to unpack. And you know, the thing is too, Marty, I didn't even think about it like that. Like I didn't think about the apology being taken and accepted for a person that it was supposed to be for. That is interesting. I didn't even look at that. And it just shows the different perspectives and the different things that people feel when something happens. Like we all looked at that, right? And not just us three having our own perspectives, but then on top of that, everybody has their own perspective and their own way that they looked at this and viewed that. And I'm really interested to hear more of the community of what they feel and what they think. So I would just want people to comment under, like, what did you feel during this? Did you feel like the situation was rectified? Did you feel like, did you feel upset? Do you need to continue to make this issue known to city council and to the mayor that you do not like this type of leadership? Then please, we got something to do about it. And next year we will do something about it. And so please.
Right. Well, and to just circle back to what Marty said, like the people we're talking to, the people that are listening, like are all potentially much more qualified to do the work of Erie City Council than some of these people on there. Clearly. And so, again, and I think we said this last week, but like in your conversations or in your own experiences, like pay attention to who stands out and who can be a leader. And in a little bit, we'll be talking to Mabel Howard from Cafe 710. And she knows the people. She talks about knowing the people and the importance of, if you're going to try to lead the community, you have to know the community. And we really will be unpacking that more. But just that idea of like, leaders have to come from the community. And if you're so disconnected from the community that you're going to talk several decades behind us, or if you're going to not be accountable for your actions, like then you don't represent this community. And so, yeah, we're just, in a little bit, we'll come back and we'll be talking to Mabel Howard, and you'll have an opportunity to hear a real leader talk.
You've been listening to the Our Erie podcast, the voice of reason in the fog of post-industrial America. Next week, we're going to talk about self-care and how we've been managing stress and living life during quarantine. Continue the conversation on Facebook/Our Erie Series. This podcast is produced by John C. Lyons, Marty Nwachukwu, Davona, Pacley, and Lydia Laythe. Funding provided by Erie Arts and Culture. Music by Corey Cook. We appreciate you for listening to Our Erie podcast. Peace.